So I want to just really quickly, the last question that you just asked, it kind of ties into this, what do you do? So there are tangible things that you can do, and the first is listen. James mentioned it right away. We've got to listen to the people who are impacted the most, because we're all impacted in some way, but we've got to listen to the people who are impacted the most. I think it's important to get experts on whatever topic it is you're exploring. For example, I'm not going to go to a podiatrist because I have a GI issue. Okay. So it's very similar. Like, go to the people who know and be willing to accept their prescription or their proposal to help you get to wherever is next. So that's one big thing is listening, trusting experts, and listening not just to experts but also to the people who this impacts. So how does the D&I become the fabric of the company? You have to think about all of your stakeholders. There's a great model. So Conscious Capitalism is an organization I've been involved with for over a decade, and I like a lot of the tenets of what they talk about, and they talk about a stakeholder perspective instead of a shareholder perspective. And in a stakeholder perspective, you really are thinking about the needs of everybody. So what does my community need? What do my employees need? What, again, if you're regulated by government, what does the government need from me? So we've got to we have to be intentional about how we weave diversity and inclusion into a fabric. And how you do that is through listening, focus groups, getting experts, educating yourself, looking in the mirror, as James said, because when you have gotten your own knowledge base, you can have a different conversation. Like James said, come prepared. You can have a very different conversation even with an expert, because your level of learning and your level of absorption will be impacted. Something else that you can do is look at the numbers. So diversity and inclusion has become this fun check the box exercise that we're like, people like to be comfortable. That's just the way, it's human nature. We like to be comfortable. And people will put, a lot of companies will put we're very diverse. I actually did a keynote for a company, another tech company back in October, and they were like, we are so diverse. I don't know what their measuring stick was, but it was definitely inadequate. But they were diverse based on what they were comfortable with. They had a pretty well balanced men and women ratio. They had quite a few minorities, but again, it was how what they were comfortable with. So we also have to be honest with ourselves that this should no longer be a check the box exercise. We need to go a little deeper. And I loved, again, Brianna's words at the beginning. We've got to do something differently. We've got to do more, and we've got to act faster. I can go on and on with solutions because I'm a solutions person, but I'll stop there to give people some more space.
So we've sorry to interrupt, Robin. Before we throw that question over to Jennifer and James, I wanted to just add in some things that are related to this question that we got from the audience. One of the questions is, D&I works when leaders tie it to performance and rewards and recognition. How do you address this when business leaders do not want to tie D&I to compensation, rewards, etc.? So that to me sounds like it's not in the fabric. So that's part of this question. How do we change that? And then another comment I got is, obviously this discussion racism applies to all races. So anything you would add around that, because diversity is about everybody. So I'd like to hear Jennifer and James, your thoughts on those two things.
James, go ahead.
Sure. So let me start with the last question first. That diversity is about all races or all groups. I think if we're not careful, we can get slippery and slip right off the point, right? So that's not to say that the other groups are not important. It is to say that if we address the biggest issue, we can make a lot of traction on the other. I had a Latinx friend say to me, well, I didn't see all these protests and riots happening when you were locking up our babies down south of the border, right? And I was like, that's a really good point, right? You get to be upset about that. I'm upset about that. And you're correct that there wasn't the same kind of reaction when that was transpiring. Let's not allow this what we might perceive as a different topic to supersede the overlapping Venn diagram of our issues, right? That there is a lot that we can accomplish together. Unfortunately, the what do they call it? The historic sin, all right, the big sin of the United States is this slavery issue, and if we, and this race issue, if we can unpack that, we will develop skills and policies and practices that will impact across the range of diversity. We will get smarter about talking about race and diversity. We become more expert about talking about race and diversity. We'll have stronger and bigger muscles, if you will, to talk about all of these issues. It will make it easier to talk about GLBTQ issues if we can deal with race/Black issues. It will make it easier to talk about the Asian issues, the Hispanic and Latinx issues, all versions of immigration across the board. If we can get stronger around the issue of race and slavery, if you will, racism and systemic racism, we have to get stronger around it. So let's do what is hard. I believe it was Mark Twain said, if you eat a live frog for breakfast every morning, right, there's nothing worse that will happen to you throughout the day. Meaning, do what is hardest first. We have been avoiding the harder topics, the hardest topics for a long time, right? So I think that you have to acknowledge that there is absolutely pain and depravity and challenges that exist in other spaces, but that we can all win by lifting what is heaviest first together.
Right. Jennifer, we are going to give you the last word. Yeah, here. Say
oh, sorry.
To close
I
this
just
out.
wanted to jump in quickly and address another part of the question that Brianna read off from the audience about tying business incentives to DEI initiatives and the reluctance to do that. DEI of any type needs sponsors. So this can't be something that's pushed from the bottom. So you need to recruit executive leaders, and the conversation to be had is not, we need to do this because it's the right thing to do. Although it is, that is not, I'm not disputing that. You have to present this as an HR or DEI executive as a business imperative. And there are lots of studies out there that show that this is directly tied to very specific business outcomes, whether it's the ability to innovate, pivot in a crisis, drive financial performance, increase profitability, reduce waste and costs and expenses. So part of this is to call it what it is and then tie it to the impact that you're looking for, and then measure the progress just like you would any other strategy. Is that when we have more diverse leadership throughout an organization at all levels, involvement, more inclusion, right? It's not just the seat at the table, it's a voice at the table that actually can affect change. These are often conversations around things like sponsorship and mentorship, right? This is not a huge performance gap that we're trying to deal. Well, if only that, you know, our Black staff were better at blah, or only our women were better at negotiation or blah. This is not that. The data out there shows that. It says this is access to authority and power and systemic institutionalized issues. So what I would encourage you to do is to get really overt about the business metrics that you're driving, and use this as a strategy to drive those metrics, because that's the language that leadership worries about. They're worried about profitability. They're worried about how that ties. That's how you tie stakeholders to shareholders, which is ultimately the motivator for most businesses.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think that's the perfect way to leave this conversation, because I was seeing things in the chat really about the buy-in piece of this. Like, if the people on the call are on board, how do they get other leaders on board with them to really make change in business? So I think that's a really great place to start and focus some energy. Thank you so much, Jennifer, Aaliyah, James, and Robin, for moderating. This was a really great discussion, and I know our audience appreciated it because of the things I was seeing in the chat. So thank you so much. And everyone on the call, I hope to see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.